I guess I will record. Okay, so today we're going to install a version of Server 2016. Do some interesting install of it. I'm going to show you how to install and try to save some space if you want to deploy something out like at your house. I'm going to kind of do some weirdness. The first install is going to be pretty easy. We'll just install like we would normally do with a virtual machine, but making clones is some complex. We'll probably not get to that until Friday. Go ahead and launch your Hyper-V manager. And when it loads up, you'll have to click on your computer name. Make sure you're not clicked on Hyper-V manager, actually clicked on the name of your computer. And also verify that the number out beside it matches the number you're sitting at, just so that you're not connected to another machine and you lose where you install this stuff at. Because with networking, it's easy to do. So Hyper-V manager comes up and you clicked on your machine. You probably only have like one virtual machine. You may have 5 virtual machines in the list, something like that. I don't think I've installed anything in other classes yet. And then over on the right side, how do you think you can create a new virtual machine? Probably under new, right? I'm sure you could also right click and no, that doesn't work. You have to go over here to the new portion. You can create a new virtual machine, create a new hard disk, create a new floppy disk. Well, we're going to create a new virtual machine. VirtualBox had I think is a blue circle, kind of fuzzy blue circle. So you clicked on for new, I believe. But it's been a while. The new version may have something different on it. So if you created a virtual machine with VirtualBox or any other virtualization software, it shouldn't be too hard. We got this little intro here. Basically ignore everything. Actually, if you've never done something before, you should read everything. Make sure you're not sending nukes somewhere. And click next. So it's going to ask us to choose a location and a name for the virtual machine. Let's name this one AM LAN 1, and then put your last name. Followed by RO. I uppercased them, so yeah, AM LAN 1, your last name, and then RO. After it's all said and done, we're going to lock this one as read-only and clone off of it. That's why I put RO for read-only. But it won't be read-only until we get everything set up and fixed with it. And that's all we have to do. Don't worry about the checkbox. Notice it's going to store the configuration files under C drive under a hidden folder called Program Data. That folder is normally not visible if you're looking at your C drive. It's hidden. And then a Microsoft Windows Hyper-V. Just click Next. The generation. If you're installing a 32-bit operating system, you should leave it at generation 1. If it's 64-bit, most likely you're going to be picking generation 2. It supports UEFI BIOS and 64-bit operating systems. They run more efficient if you go with Gen 2. In other classes, we will create some Gen 1s because in security class, we run some older software. Gen 2 for everything that we do in this class because we're installing all Microsoft products and they're all going to be 64-bit. Next, start up the memory. If you're trying to replicate this at home, you might want to put like 2 gig of RAM or 1.5 gig, 15 You have to do 512 plus 1024 to, you always want to make sure it's actual what you could physically buy RAM sticks and add up to. It has to be powers of 2. You wouldn't want to put 1500. You wouldn't want to put 2000 for 2 gig. Notice this is 1 gig and it's 1024. We're going to use 4 gigabytes. And if you're Cisco, you probably know the powers of 2 and maybe 1024, 2048, 4096. Maybe you can count that high. But you should always calculate what's the actual RAM, because if you don't give it the full, what physical RAM would be, the OS can get confusing and it normally runs really slow. I've had speed issues in the past, so I just rounded it. So we have 32 gig in these systems, so we're going to use the 4096. Like I said, if you're trying to replicate this at home, you might want to run 2048 to run smaller. I'm going to put use dynamic memory checkbox. That's not the greatest technology for conserving memory, running multiple machines on a single system, but it's what Microsoft has. VMware has a better mechanism, but Microsoft has dynamic memory, so if the virtual machine, the operating system, and applications don't need all the RAM, it'll not use the full 4 gig. It'll back down so you can do let other stuff run. I can kind of show you that just like pulling this down. All of these machines up here from the Tuesday class that's shown on my screen, they're all set with 4 gig. Notice how much RAM they're actually consuming. So that's dynamic memory is a good checkbox. If that wasn't checked, it would be consuming 4096. Whether it needed it or not, it would be reserved. So kind of cool to leave that checked. I'll go and go next. The network. You should have an internal. Internal network. And if you've taken Cisco, you know you can't have 2 computers with the same IP address or the same MAC on the same network, right? They would complain. Also, computer name. If it has the same computer name or same IP address, it will conflict. With this class, if we're all using internal, that means the virtual machines are only will talk to themselves inside your PC, but your neighbors in the class, they won't see. So we can all use the same name, and it makes it easier to teach if everybody uses the same IP address on the machine, same name. You just won't be able to use the internet or anything with these machines. We're just set up our own little private experimental network. That's why we're using internal. Next, the hard disk, we're going to set it at 60 instead of 127. That should be the only thing you have to change here. The location should be on V drive. We have an SSD in the system to make things faster. It dramatically made things faster. It gave us a lot more time to have like days we can just like do test out. It literally saved 2-3 hours a week just by putting an SSD in the system. So pretty neat. Other things you can do at this point, you could use an existing virtual hard disk. So if there was already one that had an operating system installed, you could browse and connect it. You could attach one later, but this is brand new. We don't have anything installed yet, so we're creating a 60 gig, and we'll go next. The dialog box realizes that since we're creating a blank hard disk, we probably are wanting to install an operating system. We probably want to attach an image of a DVD that would have an operating system installer on it. So we could either install later, install something from a network-based, or we could click this button here and browse for the ISO image to install from. You probably already have C:\ISO there from other classes that have used your computer. If you click browse, if you're not on CISO, then go to your CISO and find that Core SWDVD9 Win Server Core 2016 64-bit. Make sure it's got the -4 in it, or the last 3 digits of the file name is 526.iso. We tried to delete the old version, so it hopefully it's not on your computer to accidentally choose. And then just click open, and it'll put it in the path. Cool. If I go next, I could hit finish at this point, or you can go next, and you can kind of compare yours to mine. Should look pretty similar. Don't use Goodman. Had a lot of people that try to be my kid. One of them last year says, "I'll just be your son for this semester." No. So use your last name. And go and click finish. It's not terribly hard. You pick the hardware that you want to consume, and virtual machines created. And just like in VirtualBox, actually, this is a little bit better than VirtualBox. You can log out of the system and it's still running. I think VirtualBox has to be opened. Don't think you can close it, it shuts it down. With Hyper-V, this is a higher level virtualization than VirtualBox is. So notice I don't have any of these other virtual machines up and showing on my computer screen. They're running in the background all the time. So that's really a big benefit. So when we install, or if we even get halfway through the install and the class is getting to the end, you don't have to worry about losing anything. You can just close the window and log out and come back to the next class period, and it's still at the same spot. So that's pretty cool. So Hyper-V's got a lot of enterprise stuff, capabilities with it. I'm going to right click and connect. Windows installation media, they're the bootloader on the if you actually had it on where's my Windows? There's a Windows 10. So if you actually had a DVD, the bootloader on here comes up and it asks you to hit space bar to boot from CD. Otherwise, it tries to pass control to the hard disk. So that's why I paused at this point in time. We've got this open. When we hit the power button, we'll have to click inside the black window and make sure the mouse stays centered inside the black area. Get ready to hit space bar so it'll boot from the image, the installer image. Most IT people don't use disk anymore. They use Rufus and take the ISO image and transfer it to a USB drive and boot it off USB instead of carrying these around. They're selling computers now without CD-ROMs in them. Only USBs. I said CD-ROM, DVD. So I'm going to click play. I'm going to click in the window, and I'm going to hit space bar so it would boot from CD. It might just go straight in, or it might stop right here, and you have to hit enter on running Windows setup. And if you run Windows 10 or installed anything in VirtualBox, you probably had to do something similar, although the Linux installer, you didn't have to hit spacebar. I think it just went straight to it, or should have. Okay, a lot of complicated questions here. What language are you? Okay, well, it's not too complicated. It should be US and English here. Just go next. Another complicated dialog box. Do we want to repair an existing computer or install? Well, we don't have anything on here yet, so we got to install. Now we got the complexity coming up. I see it popping on your screens. There's 4 different versions we can install. We can install standard or we can install data center. And then between the 2 of them, there's one that has a desktop experience, and then there's one that has command line only. You're too new yet to just throw in one that's command line only. So let's not install the command line only one. Let's install the one that's not recommended. Let's install the one that has a graphical desktop with a start menu and things that you're more comfortable with. So make sure you select the second one. We're not going to install data center. There's not much point installing data center inside of a VM. You'd install data center on bare metal. It's designed licensing that way. Data center allows you to install an unlimited number of 2016 servers as virtual machines on it. Standard allows you to only install 2 virtual machines with standard on it. If you have to install 3, you have to pay Microsoft an extra license. Or if you do 4, it'd be a second license. So yeah, data center is designed to be put on the bare metal so that you can run it as a Hyper-V machine and install lots of Microsoft products without having to pay any extra. It costs more. Data center is about 3 times more expensive, but some people run 10 server instances, so they only have to pay 3 times as much instead of 10 times as much if they put standard on it. So that's the money savings, depending on the number you're going to need. We're going to install standard because it's a VM, and we're not going to put a VM inside a VM, so we don't have to worry with licensing, and there's not really any difference between standard and data center since 2012 came out. So the second one, desktop experience. You'll not be happy if you pick the other one. So click next. And that was really the most complicated one. We got to accept the license agreement, and this is kind of hard for a lot of students. They don't know what to do here. Are they upgrading or are they doing custom? It's not an operating system yet, so what do you click? Custom. Upgrade would only work if you were upgrading from like 2012 server, and there's nothing to upgrade, so custom. And you typically never upgrade a server. You always stand up another server and just move the configuration, the data files and stuff from the old server over. You don't ever really want to upgrade. There's too much configuration drift and old junk that could possibly cause issues with trying to upgrade. You won't get all the latest security stuff if you try to upgrade. So very, very bad to upgrade. Nothing to do with the hard disk. We'll go next. That's not too hard, is it? I think you probably could have done that even without help, except for maybe picking which one to install. Okay, for those that are watching this video at home on YouTube later on, so I'll post that. The system's automatically restarting, and it's going to come up and ask us for a password into the system. So all the class, pass 1, 2, 3, 4, notice the capital P in pass 1, 2, 3, 4. Microsoft only accepts a quote secure password. And secure passwords are 7 characters or longer, I believe. And they must also have 3 out of 4 characters in them, meaning uppercase, lowercase, numbers, or symbols. So 3 out of those 4. So the capital P is an uppercase. We have some lowercase letters, and then we have numbers, and it's 8 characters long. So that's Microsoft considers as a secure password, even though that would be broken in like 3 seconds because it's in every dictionary. Brute forcing will take a while, but it's in every hackers try dictionary first. It's in all of those. So for lab purposes only, pass 1, 2, 3, 4 because it's easy and it's accepted. Yours may ask you for resolution size. I think you're a 1080p system, so just whatever. You may not want to make it full screen. You want to maybe make like 1024 by or 1280 by 1024, maybe something like that. What is it? What's a default wanting you to select? Yeah, something like that. 1280 by 1024 would probably be a good size to run. So the Control-Alt-Delete is a little button in the menu bar. See, most of you found it. So you do have to, you can't use Control-Alt-Delete because if you use Control-Alt-Delete, it sends it to the host system and you go to the lock your computer, change your password screen, and it doesn't, you cancel it, it's still sitting there. Hit Control-Alt-Delete. Like, what do I do? So yeah, that's what the little three little buttons. Looks like you found it, logged in as pass 1, 2, 3, 4. When you get logged in, you'll notice if you wait a little bit, Server Manager will load up onto the screen. Server Manager is probably one of the main tools that you'd use to manage the system. They've got a newer tool in 2019 server. It's kind of similar. It's got a little bit different interface, but when they originally come out with 2012 server, it had the Windows 8 user interface, and hopefully you weren't punished by having to use the Windows 8 computer. You didn't have a start menu. You had a charms bar. It was absolutely horrendous. Luckily, you could do just about everything you needed to do in Server Manager. So that was pretty cool. This 2016 server, 2019 server, you have a Windows 10 interface. So if you're more comfortable with the graphical interface, you can actually use the start menu and navigate it better. But as far as the server is concerned, you're probably just going to run everything you need to do in Server Manager, and anything else you might need to do will be right-clicking on the start menu. You probably would rarely left-click the start menu. You probably are just going to use Server Manager and right-click the start menu. Pretty much gives you everything that you need to do on a server. It's either in the Server Manager tool or right-clicking of the start menu, because you've got all kind of stuff here like shutting down the computer, control panel, task manager, a bunch of event viewer and services, system, things like that is all available. Everything else would be either like under a tools menu or they give you a quick start where you have like 1, 2, 3, click each one of these and do something to the system. I normally ignore this, but basically if you click the link, it just takes you to local server on the left side is all it does. So Microsoft has built this into the server. It's called out-of-box experience, really. This dollar box right here used to be a separate application back in 2008 server, but they've integrated it all into Server Manager now. And out-of-box experience is basically right out of the box. This is everything you need to configure, like your host name, IP address, Windows updates, the time zone and stuff that you're on. Everything's right here linked. It'll If you click on them, it'll take you to the appropriate dialog box for configuring it. One thing I see we need to fix is the time zone. Mine says Pacific time. So I'm going to just click the link and notice it pops the clock properties dialog box up. I mean, I could have right-clicked the clock and changed times and brought it up, but it's just easier to have this. Microsoft is proud of it, and I agree, it's pretty cool. Change time zone, and not had any students lately have issues with the difference between Central America and Central Time. There's a difference. The difference is daylight savings time. So make sure you pick US and Canada, because I don't think Central America is dumb enough to do daylight savings time. It's only us. So we're the only dumb ones in the world. So click Central, make sure it's US and Canada, not the other -6, because they're smarter than we are. And click OK. And OK again. Notice it doesn't refresh right away. You either wait for a while or you click the arrow circle at the top of the screen and it'll refresh, and you'll see that it says Central Time. Pretty cool, huh? Maybe? No? I don't know. I thought it was cool. Okay, so this computer, we're going to use it as a template for other systems. I don't know if the daylight savings time is going to save and carry over. If we clone off of it, I'm not going to fix the IP address or any of the other stuff, because when we clone, those other systems are actually they're going to need their unique computer name and unique IP. The only thing I want to do is go ahead and pre-extract some of the software that we're going to use throughout the semester. For security purposes, Microsoft only extracts and installs a basic set of tools and services onto the system. It keeps all the other, like file sharing, printer sharing, and other server related items compressed into a file that's not accessible, which is a good thing. In the past, back in the 90s, you install a Microsoft product and it wanted to install everything. And it wanted to turn everything on, and it didn't come with a firewall. And everything had like a hidden administrator page that didn't have to have any passwords to it. And everybody had full administrative rights to everything. And the Everyone group actually had anonymous user a part of it. So you could connect to any Windows machine anonymously and have full administrative rights to it. It was a very big pain to try to lock it down and get it to where the world wasn't just like straight into the system. So now they've changed that all around. Anonymous is no longer part of Everyone, and there's a lot more stricter permissions. You can't get into certain folders unless you're an admin, and even the administrator can't mess with some files. Some of the core parts of Windows, they've locked out the administrator account from accessing to keep people from hacking it. So what we have to do, we're going to run some services on some clones, and I want to go ahead and pre-extract them. It'll actually take up less space if I pre-extract. And to do that, I'm going to use the Manage menu. And there's an Add Roles and Features. I'm going to go ahead and click on Add Roles and Features. Brings us up the dialog box. We just go Next. And you typically always want a role-based or feature-based installation. I'm not set up remote desktop service install. That's if you want to have thin clients and like virtualize the Windows 10 desktop on a server somewhere and then broadcast it to a thin client. If y'all been in like the science building or some of the other buildings where there's some thin clients, I don't know if you've noticed that or not. They're around campus. We don't actually have a full PC. You just have this like a monitor or just like little bitty tiny box on the back of the monitor. It's a thin client. So role-based is pretty much all you'll ever mess with. It's the only one you'll mess with in this class anyway. We'll go next. Pick a server. Since it is networking, you could have lots of servers you could choose from the list if we had more than one, but there's just the one we've installed. So we'll go next. And right here, the server can do all of that stuff. All of those features could be serviced out to clients. However, notice they're unchecked. They are on the hard disk. They're just compressed and not accessible to somebody external of the computer system. That's another huge benefit. Used to, you'd have to have the DVD with you. Anytime that you wanted to add a service that didn't get automatically installed during installation, it asked you to put the DVD in the system. You had to keep track of that. And that was really annoying if you didn't keep track of it. So now it's really, really cool. All the features are on the hard drive. And also when Windows installs updates, it doesn't just update what you've got installed, it updates anything that's in those compressed files too. So anytime you install something new, it's always the latest patched version of it. Where in the olden days, it pulled off the DVD, and then after that was done, you have to go rerun Windows updates and reinstall everything, reboot the computer. It's like a whole day process, install one little thing. Okay, we are going to need the Active Directory Domain Services role. And if you check it, it's the second one in the list. It also pops up and goes, hey, there's some graphical tools used to manage this role. Do you want to add them? Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and click Add Features. Well, those are the graphical tools that will be added into the system. We also, any Active Directory domain controller also has to have DNS included. So I'm going to click the DNS feature. And again, I'm going to click Add Features into it. So knowing that DNS had to be picked would just, well, I'm telling you now, Active Directory has to have DNS to work. So because the domain controller, those two roles pretty much need to be installed. I'm going to go next. On this page, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to add a couple more tools. Remote Server Administration Tools, RAS, or no, RSAT. Got to be cool like the IT people. They call it RSAT tools. Why do they call it RSAT? Because they take the first letter of each one of those, R-S-A-T, and they just say RSAT. And IT people are lazy. They don't even want to say all the words. They love acronyms. You've been hounded with acronyms. Your second semester, you cry, dreaming of acronyms, chasing it in your nightmares. Okay, so I'm going to expand out the RSAT. And role-based, expand it out. I'm going to check the file services tools. I guess I need to expand it out too. File server resource manager tools. I'm also going to check print and document services tools. Don't think I need anything under here. No. So as the semester progresses, we'll have we'll have 3 servers in total, and we'll have one of them that's going to be a print server and a file server, and it's not going to have, it's going to be a core, meaning there won't be a graphical interface on top of it. So I'm pre-selecting tools that I know we're going to use later on in the semester, so we can use these tools to connect to that other system we're going to install and manage it. And of course, these can always be added later on in time. I'm just doing it right here at the beginning. When I clone off of it, we're going to have 2 that'll have a graphical desktop. We'll have these pre-extracted. It'll make the clone file smaller. So I'll go next. And just continue on, next, and next, and install. And it will progress. The little bar will go all the way to the end, and then it will just have like a close button after it's done. There won't be anything flash on the screen. You'll be sitting there and get distracted and not realize that it's been done for 15 minutes. But it's break time, so let's take a break. Probably before you can get out the door. Okay, so come back from break, and if you look at your screen, it should say feature installation successful. Pretty cool. I'm just going to go ahead and click close. Now, here's the trick. Also, note you got a yellow exclamation point probably too, letting you know that you've installed some features that need extra configuration. We're not going to configure them right now, but it's nice that they give us a link and let us know that, hey, we need to do some post configuration into the system. But right now we're getting to the point where we're about ready to lock the system down to read only so we can clone off of it. And this is also nice to know because everybody's virtualizing instead of wasting hardware and running only one operating system on a computer. Nobody does that anymore in the server world. They run multiple OSs at the same time on one server. So to deal with that, there's problems, especially whenever you want to try to speed things up and not go through an entire install process. You want to possibly install other apps into systems, and you can just clone or copy. But the problem is Windows has some security identifiers built into it, and also the IP address, computer name, and things like that. If you just try to do a direct copy, it's going to cause networking conflicts. So to fix it, we have to run a program called sysprep. And luckily, every supported version of Windows has it already built in and installed. Used to, you'd have to download it as a separate tool. But virtualization came about. Microsoft has now included it because they realize that tool is required by pretty much everybody. So if we open up File Explorer, we'll find the sysprep tool under the C drive. And we'll expand out Windows. Under Windows, show you some tips here. If you've got a whole bunch of folders to go through and you have to jump to a folder that starts with an S, if you just highlight one of the subfolders under Windows and hit S on the keyboard, it takes you down to the S's really fast. So that's just a little tip. It makes you maybe not have to scroll so much. It jumps you to a section or a file really fast. So that's kind of cool. So I'm looking for System 32, I think. Yeah, System 32. So again, I'll click on a folder under System 32, and I'm going to S again to get down to the S's under System 32. And I'll scroll a little bit find sysprep. So you can kind of see my path up here into where I've had to drill down. That's what they call it, drilling down through the directory structure. Went to the hard disk first, which was C, went to the Windows folder. I found System32, went inside that. I found a sysprep folder, and that's where I'm at now. The contents of the sysprep folder has one executable inside of it. And this right here will basically strip out things like the IP address and the computer name, most specifically the computer name and a security identifier, a unique, global unique security identifier that has to be ripped out if you make a copy. Because every install of Windows, that unique ID, if you go onto a network to try to share resources, it'll start ignoring the computer name and it'll look at the unique ID and go, oh, nope, that's the same as another system over here, and things will break. So let's double click sysprep. There's two things that you need to do here. You always need to check generalize, and you need to click on shutdown. Generalize is required to rip out that security identifier. And shutdown, because if you do anything else, if it starts to boot up, it regenerates that security ID as soon as the bootloader hits. That'll be the first thing that's slapped back into the registry. A new random one will be created. And then if you have to clone, then you'd end up with duplicates. So that security ID cannot be in the registry. So that's why you want to shut down. So once it's stripped out, it goes powered off, and you can't ever power it back on, because that registry will just have a blank without identifier after that point. When would you not want to click generalize? Okay, well, I've done this before. I've upgraded a motherboard, and I thought, if you try to swap out a motherboard, Windows normally doesn't have enough drivers, and it like throws a fit, and it never just crashes, and then I had to reinstall and make Windows work again. Then I learned about sysprep and all that it can do. It also rips out any drivers that are specific to the hardware. So I thought, I'm not making a copy of my hard drive. I'm just taking the hard drive, maybe putting it in another computer, or I'm changing the motherboard out to a new faster board or something like that. So what I did in that case, I ran sysprep and I did the shutdown, but I didn't click generalize because I wasn't making copies. Generalize is only needed if you copy it. So I generalized the computer, then I took the hard drive, put it in a new system, or upgraded the motherboard, whatever I did. It's been a long time. Booted the computer up, and Windows went through the process of finding all the new drivers, installing drivers for everything. And then we come back, it came up, and I logged into my profile, and all my stuff was there. All my favorites, all the games were still installed, everything was there, and then the new drivers were. It was great. So if you're ever upgrading stuff and you're going to move a drive from one computer to the next, you'd need to sysprep. As long as you're not copying stuff and going to have more than one copy on your computer, you wouldn't check generalize. So that's a tip. And I hope you learned something. Hope that's cool, something new. If you already knew it, then that's good too. Did anybody know about this? No? Awesome. That's why you're taking college classes. Learn something. Okay, that has to be checked. It has to be on shutdown. And for some reason, I always have one or two students that don't do that. And then we get to cloning off of it, and then the clones pop up and say, oh, we found a duplicate SID. And they got to delete everything and reinstall from scratch from the beginning. This right here will save you lots and lots of time if you don't mess up here. So it's just simple. Generalize, shut down, click OK. It's processing, and actually probably at this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and close this window because it's just going to shut down after it gets done. So I'm going to go and close that window so I don't actually accidentally do anything else. And I'm going to sit and wait until this here shuts down. And then I'm going to delete it. Deleting it will prevent it from accidentally being started in the future. And then you're like, well, wait a second, it's deleted. How are we going to copy it? It doesn't delete the hard disk. It just deletes the RAM configuration, all the settings that would allow you to start it up again. I think VirtualBox actually deletes the drive and everything when you delete there. But Microsoft's different. They don't actually delete the hard disk file that was created. But I know you definitely, once it shuts down, you don't want to hit start. And if it does power off, then you can just go ahead and right click and delete. So see, mine says off. I'm going to, or just hit delete on my keyboard. Are you sure I want to delete this? Yep, delete. If it accidentally starts to run, you'll have to let it boot all the way back up and redo the sysprep. Otherwise, your labs feature on like Friday, it's going to be not good. Well, you might be able to do it today. It doesn't take a lot of time to build 2 more servers. We don't have to reinstall. We just copy this one. Okay, I think everybody's done. Okay. VirtualBox had a real easy one. You just right clicked and did link clone, and you made differencing disk through it or clone disk off of it. What we're going to do is a lot more complicated. Microsoft had no easy way to do it except going under new hard disk. We create basically a parent-child relationship, that read-only one. The whole operating system is installed, and we're going to take make a child disk, and when it starts up, only the changes are going to be stored into what's known as a differencing disk. So when you make changes to the computer name or any configuration that changes, just those changes will be written to a separate disk, and then it just maps over the parent. It's only good for lab situations where that you want to run several machines and you want to save some hard disk space. And we'll kind of show the benefits when we get them up and running. So I'm going to go next. We want to VHDX, and we want to go next. We want to click on differencing. We'll read about this. And this type of disk associated is a parent-child relationship with another disk that you want to leave intact. You can make changes to the data or operating system without affecting the parent disk. And you can also revert changes easily. So if you screw up, you could just wipe the system out and then relink another disk off the parent. You don't ever have to reinstall and do all the stuff we did in adding the roles and stuff. It's already locked there. Other disks you can do fixed size. So when you create a file, it zeroes it out and it's whatever size, like 60 gig in size. The dynamic, that's what automatically happened when we did the new, created a virtual machine. It made a 60 gig file, but it was probably only a couple of kilobytes in size. And as we installed Windows, it slowly grew, and it can grow up to 60 gig. That's normally what most people use. This here is lab purpose only, and just showing you how you could replicate this at your house and not use so much hard disk space. So next, this new specify the name and location of the virtual hard disk. So this is asking us for what the new disk will be called. We'll name it AM LAN1, your last name, and server 1. kind of similar to what we named the other one, except instead of RO at the end, we replaced it with server one. I didn't put a space. I kept server one all together because that's going to be the name of the computer name. Computer names can't have spaces in them. It doesn't really matter right here, but trying to be consistent all the way through. So when I hit next, the location should have been B2 on your system. When I hit next, it's asking us to specify the parent hard disk. So when I click browse, you should be able to find that read-only hard disk that has your last name associated with it, AMLAN1, last name RO. That's the, notice it's about 11 gig in size. So go and hit open. And we'll go and click next. Should look kind of similar to mine. And you go and finish. Let's do the same thing, but let's create one that says server 2. Exact same thing. I'm going to go up here to new hard disk, and I'm going to next. VHDX is selected. Next, select differencing. Next, I'm going to type the same thing, AM LAN1 and server 2 this time instead of server 1. That's the only difference change that we did from the first one to the second one. And when I go next, I'm going to again pick the same RO as before, because that's the one that has the full install. Notice we see the one we created, server 1, it's 4 kilobytes, 4096 KB in size. So you don't want to select that one. You want to select the RO because it's the one, the 11 gig that's got the OS in it. So click open, and you can click finish, or you can next and make sure your summary looks okay, and click finish. So if those two disks booted up, they boot up with 2016 server, and any changes that files slowly start growing as changes and stuff are written to disk. Let's do that. Let's go new virtual machine. And you would not do this in a production environment. You wouldn't use differencing disk. This would only be for lab purposes. And you don't have to do it for lab purposes. It's just showing you how you can, if you want to, if you need to practice and save hard disk space, one method to do it. So I'm going to go next. Plus, I think the test out certification exam has something to do with differencing disk. So it's good for us to run through. We're going to do the virtual machine name is going to be the same as the hard disk files we just created. So we're going to do the AM LAN1 last name. We'll start with server 1. The generation has to be the same generation that the parent disk was, and that was generation 2. The memory could be something different, but we're going to pick 4096 because we have 32 gig of RAM in these systems. You have to play with your numlock key. We're going to make sure dynamic memory is selected. So 4096 and dynamic memory. When we go next, we're making sure internal networking is selected. The next part is a little bit more difficult because we have an existing hard disk. We're not creating a hard disk, we're using an existing hard disk, and we're picking the one we created earlier. So when you click browse, make sure you match server 1 with the name server 1. It should be the 4096 KB file, 4 meg, I guess is how big that is. Click open. So that's what it should look like. You should not be creating a new hard disk at this time. And then just click finish. And we'll do the same thing for server 2. If you're comfortable, you can go ahead and create it real quick. I'll go through it, talk through it kind of slow, to also upload this as a YouTube video. So I'm going to go to new virtual machine. Next, again, the AM LAN 1, last name server 2 this time. Now to remember, generation is generation 2. The RAM again, 4096 with dynamic selected. Internal for the network. That way server 1 and server 2 will be able to talk to each other. They're on the same network segment. Virtual hard disk. Use existing hard disk, the middle radio button, browse, and I'm on server 2 this time, so I'll pick the AM LAN 1 server 2 file. And then I click finish. So that can be done pretty quick, especially like if you're trying to set up a lab at home and you're wanting 5 or 6 different servers, and they all want to be like 2016 or something. You could create a bunch of differencing disks and link the files like that. I'm going to go ahead and connect to each one of these, and I'm going to make my system work hard. I'm going to start them both at the same time. I don't know if it would time out and count down. I went ahead and hit enter to make it boot into Windows. So if you've ever bought a computer off of the shelf or had one shipped to you new from the factory, it always starts up and asks you a few questions like your name and things like that. That's what's going to happen now. It's going to ask us, I think, for the password and stuff again, some basic information. Notice it's getting devices ready. That was another thing SysPrep does, is it deletes any pre-configured drivers and hardware. Everybody's faster than me. Probably because I'm recording the video. What's this asking all? Simple stuff, language. And then what's it ask after that? Password probably. License terms. Yep. And then just use that pass 1, 2, 3, 4. I like how pleasant they are. Hi there. That was a lot faster than installing two separate ones. I mean, you had to do the initial setup, and in all actuality, the time it took to talk about it all, I don't know. Almost could have set up two separate ones in the time it took to do just these two if I did them both at the same time. But the other purpose to this is if I look at my V drive, my original parent disk was 11 gigabytes, and these two that are running is taking up about 1.6 gigabytes. So you got the cost savings there. If I had two separate ones, it would have been about 22, 23 gig. So right now, instead of 23 gig, I'm 11, 12, 13, 14, about 14 gig. I mean, I would have a lot of savings, 14 gig versus 23. And we're going to do enough configuration and maybe some patches and stuff. If you see the class from last semester, their differencing disks are about the same size as the parent. So if you do a lot to it, you're not going to get cost savings, but there is a possibility, depending on what you do. If you don't do patches or anything, it might be less than if you installed two. So just something you can ponder about on what type of home lab are the possibilities of what you could do. Like I said, the differencing disks are not cool because if the parent disk ever gets corrupted or deleted, well, guess what? These two are broke. You just broke both of them. Or if you had like 5 machines and somebody accidentally deleted the parent, and you got 5 machines that don't work. So that's why you don't want to do that in a production environment. You want each machine to have its own. Well, pretty spiffy. At this point, I think if we click on local server, did Central Time stay with it? Cool. The time zone stayed with it. Neat. What about those features that we installed? Did they stay with it? Yeah, it's still saying, hey, you need to configure Active Directory. So that's pretty cool. You definitely don't want to configure Active Directory until you get the name and IP address and everything configured. So I was thinking of the next class, this class, I believe. I don't want to go any further today. On Friday, we will fix the computer name and the IP address on both machines, make sure they can see each other. And we might actually set up an Active Directory domain. That's basically the database that houses the user accounts and passwords and any other machines that you want to be managed by these servers, like Windows 10 machines and resources. So we're going to be creating that SQL database and just going through the wizard. So we can do that on Friday. I don't want to run into that today. So we can leave these running. We can go ahead and close them down. And I noticed the amount of RAM that they're taking is not 4096, much less. If anybody happened to watch when you first start it up, it'll initially start up and consume all 4096 because it doesn't know what the operating system is going to need or not need. And then after it gets fully loaded and running, since it's Microsoft hosting a Microsoft operating system, they talk with each other and can figure out what RAM's needed and back down. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so we can go ahead and log off, close stuff down. Well, Yeah. I'm going to end the recording.